So, um, you know that feeling when you're leaving for work or maybe you're heading out for a weekend trip and you just stop by the thermostat on your way out the door,
Oh, yeah. The classic ritual.
right? You punch that down button like 3 or 4 times, you hear that little satisfying click, and you just walk out to your car feeling incredibly responsible.
You feel like a financial genius, basically.
Exactly. I mean, you're thinking, I am saving energy, I am saving money, I'm doing the right thing for the planet.
Mm.
But we are jumping into a deep dive today that completely blew my mind.
Yeah, it's a massive paradigm shift.
It really is. We're pulling from a fascinating discussion on a show called Cool Talk with Hartzell's. And it turns out that exact habit, the golden rule of home energy savings, the whole set it and forget it thing,
Hmm.
might actually be secretly driving up your utility bill.
It is, well, it's a huge blind spot for anyone who prides themselves on being energy conscious. I mean, you think you're gaming the system, right?
Mm.
But the underlying technology powering your home has fundamentally changed while you basically weren't looking.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really understand this shift, we have to look at the conventional wisdom we've all lived by for 20 years.
Oh, easily 20 years. The classic 1990s advice.
Right. The stuff we all learned growing up. Set your thermostat to 78 degrees in the summer, set it to 68 in the winter, and when you leave for the day, you bump it up or down by 7 to 10 degrees.
Yeah, the idea being that it shaves, maybe 10% off your annual bill.
Exactly. And, I mean, that was totally true for a long time.
Yeah. We should establish right away that the old advice was mathematically sound for that era. It wasn't a myth or anything.
Right, it worked.
It worked perfectly. But that rule of thumb was built specifically for the single stage on or off equipment of the 1990s.
It was designed around the limitations of old machinery, basically.
Exactly. And modern homes, they're increasingly using high-efficiency variable speed systems, which operate under a completely different set of thermodynamic principles.
Yeah, the source material actually uses this striking analogy to capture the disconnect for you. They say treating a modern variable speed HVAC system like an old single-stage unit is basically like paying for a Ferrari and driving it like a U-Haul.
That is a perfect way to describe it. I mean, the technology evolved, but our daily habits just didn't keep up.
So, okay, let's break down the mechanics here, because we really need to understand how the new stuff differs from the old stuff.
Right. So think about an older single-stage system. It's entirely binary.
Like a light switch.
Exactly like a light switch. It is either completely off or it is blasting at 100% maximum capacity. There's zero middle ground.
No nuance at all.
None. When the thermostat calls for cooling, this massive contactor slams shut, the compressor kicks on at full torque, and freezing air just blasts through the vents, and it does that until it hits the target temperature, and then it shuts off completely.
Okay, wait, let me play devil's advocate here, because I'm sure you are wondering the same thing. Off means zero energy, right?
Yeah.
So if the house is empty, how is zero energy costing me money? Like if I let the house get up to 80 degrees while I'm at work, the machine is resting. The meter isn't spinning.
And that logic holds up perfectly if you still have a single-stage system, because that
Yeah.
system always runs at 100% anyway, so your only lever for efficiency is literally just keeping it turned off.
Okay, but a variable speed system is different.
Vastly different. It's not a light switch. It's a highly calibrated dimmer switch.
Dimmer switch, right?
Yeah, the compressor uses an inverter drive that allows it to actually modulate its speed. So it might run at 30% capacity or 45% or 60.
It doesn't just slam onto 100.
Exactly. It's engineered explicitly to run slow, low, and steady. It gently maintains the environment rather than blasting it.
So letting the house drop 10 degrees while you're at work, it's kind of like sitting on the couch all day and then immediately trying to sprint a 4-minute mile without warming up.
Oh, man. Yeah, the system basically pulls a muscle. You're demanding it close this massive gap instantly.
So let's look at the scenario from the sources. We're talking about an August afternoon in central Oklahoma. It is brutally hot.
Oh, yeah. Baking.
Right. You let the house drift 8 degrees while you're at work. So the physical structure is just absorbing all that sun.
The walls, the furniture, the floors, they're all just soaking up that heat all day long.
And then you get home at 5 p.m., walk in the door, and demand that the system slam the temperature back down to 74 degrees. You just punch the button and ask for a miracle.
And the variable speed compressor looks at that and assesses the situation. It realizes it has this enormous mountain to climb.
Because it's not just cooling the air.
Exactly. It has to remove the heat from all those physical objects you just mentioned. So because the demand is so high and so immediate, it has to abandon its highly efficient low-speed operation. It jumps straight to 100% full throttle output.
And here is the crucial piece of physics that really stood out in the deep dive. Full output is actually the absolute least efficient mode for a variable speed system.
It is the absolute worst way to run it.
But wait, why is 100% so much worse? Doesn't it just get the job done faster? I mean, get it over with.
It does get it done faster, but it requires disproportionately more electricity to move that heat. See, when a compressor runs at a low speed, the heat transfer across the indoor and outdoor coils is highly efficient.
Right. The refrigerant has time to actually do its job.
Exactly. It has plenty of time to absorb heat inside and release it outside. But when you ramp that compressor up to its maximum speed, you hit severe diminishing returns.
You're just forcing it.
Yeah, you're pushing the refrigerant through the coils so fast that the heat transfer becomes incredibly inefficient. You're burning massive amounts of raw electricity just to brute force the process.
So the whole reason you paid thousands of dollars extra for this variable speed machine was so it could cruise efficiently at 30%.
Right. And by forcing a massive daily recovery, you are manually overriding the very efficiency you paid for.
That is wild. And here's where it gets really interesting. Because if running at 100% capacity in the summer just wastes electricity, pushing the system to 100% in the winter does something much, much worse.
Oh, winter is a whole different beast.
It totally is. It awakens this physical mechanism in the ductwork that completely wrecks your utility bill. And because of this, the Department of Energy has actually updated their recommendations.
Quietly updated them, yeah.
Very quietly.
Yeah.
They now say for heat pumps and variable speed systems, you should use a maximum of 4-degree setback in the summer.
And in the winter?
In the winter, no more than a 2-degree drop if it's below freezing outside.
Just 2 degrees. I mean, that is a drastic shift from the old drop it 10 degrees while you sleep mentality.
It really is. And, look at these machines. They have microprocessors. They're supposedly incredibly advanced. Why do they panic when faced with a freezing house? Like, why can't the heat pump just take its time and efficiently warm the house back up from 60 to 70 degrees over a few hours?
It's all because of how thermostats are programmed to respond to our human desire for instant gratification. Plus, there's a mechanism we in the HVAC industry call the silent budget killer.
The silent budget killer, which is just an ominous phrase.
It really is. We are talking about auxiliary electric heat strips.
I mean, just the phrase electric heat strips sounds like a spinning electrical meter.
Oh, it is without a doubt the most expensive way to heat a home. To really grasp the severity, we have to look at how a heat pump actually operates.
Right, because it doesn't make heat.
Exactly. A heat pump doesn't create heat by burning fossil fuels like a traditional gas furnace does. It moves heat. It uses a refrigerant cycle.
Even when it's freezing outside?
Even when it's 30 degrees out, there is still ambient thermal energy in the air. The refrigerant in the outdoor coil is engineered to be so incredibly cold that it can actually absorb that trace amount of heat from the winter air, compress it to raise its temperature, and then move it inside your home.
It's literally harvesting heat out of the freezing winter air.
It's a brilliant feat of thermodynamics. And because it's just moving heat rather than generating it from scratch, it's highly efficient.
Okay, so what's the energy draw on that?
A modern heat pump compressor running normally pulls about 3 kilowatts of electricity.
3 kilowatts.
But harvesting heat from freezing air is a slow, steady process. It's a marathon pace, and people don't want to wait. So inside your ductwork, directly above the blower fan, manufacturers install backup emergency electric heat strips.
And these are the budget killers.
Right. Imagine the glowing orange coils inside a giant pop-up toaster. That is exactly what they are. It's pure resistance heating. They're designed for emergencies, like if the compressor completely fails or if it's 15 degrees below zero and the heat pump physically just cannot extract enough ambient heat to keep the house warm.
Okay, so while the efficient heat pump pulls 3 kilowatts, what do those giant toaster coils cost to run?
Those emergency heat strips pull anywhere from 10 to 15 kilowatts of power.
Wait, 15 kilowatt? That's up to 5 times the energy draw.
Up to 5 times, yeah. It is staggering. So apply your 1990s thermostat habit to a cold February morning.
Yeah.
You let the house drop to 60 degrees overnight because you think sleeping in the cold is saving you a ton of money.
Right.
You wake up freezing, you walk to the wall, and you bump the thermostat up to 70 degrees. The system looks at that massive 10-degree gap. It looks at the freezing air outside, and its algorithm calculates that its efficient little 3-kilowatt compressor simply cannot harvest heat fast enough to satisfy your immediate demand for a 70-degree house.
Because it wants to give you that instant gratification.
Exactly. So it panics. It immediately activates those 15-kilowatt toaster coils to close the gap.
Wow. You just turned a state-of-the-art, ultra-efficient heat pump into literally the world's most expensive space heater.
That's exactly what happens. For the next 45 minutes, your meter is just spinning out of control. That single artificial morning recovery run consumes so much raw electricity that it entirely erases any fractions of a penny you might have saved by letting the house get cold overnight.
You essentially penalized yourself for buying good equipment.
Yeah, you really did.
That completely upends how I think about my winter routine. But this actually creates a huge practical problem for you listening. Because if we can't use big temperature setbacks to save money anymore, how do we stay comfortable without going broke?
Right, nobody wants to be uncomfortable in their own home.
Obviously not. And the sources highlight this guy, Dave Hartzell. He's an HVAC veteran down in Kingfisher, Oklahoma.
Oh, yeah, the guy who owns the heating air company.
Right. He can install literally any equipment he wants. He can configure it however he wants. And he sets his own home's variable speed system to a flat 75 degrees in the summer and 70 degrees in the winter, and he basically never touches it.
Which, I mean, to anyone who grew up aggressively cranking the AC down to 68 degrees to cool off, that sounds deeply uncomfortable.
75 degrees during an Oklahoma August sounds absolutely miserable. It sounds like a sauna.
It does. But it means we've been measuring comfort with a completely wrong ruler this entire time.
Yes. We obsess over the dry bulb temperature, the number on the thermometer, when we really should be evaluating the dehumidifier effect.
This is where we have to dive into the physics of how the human body actually perceives heat. Because in places like Oklahoma or the Gulf Coast, or really anywhere with muggy summers, the dew points are incredibly high.
The air is just physically saturated with water vapor.
Exactly. And your body's primary cooling mechanism is evaporation. You sweat, the sweat evaporates into the air, and that phase change physically pulls heat away from your skin.
But if the air around you is already holding like 70% humidity.
And there is nowhere for your sweat to go. It just can't evaporate. So you feel hot, sticky, and totally miserable.
So how exactly does our HVAC equipment interact with that humidity? Because I know a lot of people who have their thermostats set to 72, but their house still feels like a damp, clammy cave.
Yeah, that damp cave feeling is the direct result of short cycling, which is a classic symptom of an oversized single-stage system.
Okay, walk me through that.
Let's say you have a traditional single-stage system and you set it to 72. It kicks on at maximum power. It blasts freezing cold air into the rooms. The ambient air temperature hits 72 degrees in just 10 or 15 minutes, and the thermostat proudly shuts the system off.
Right. It hit the target number. Job done.
The temperature target is met, but the comfort target totally failed. Because removing humidity from a house requires passing indoor air over the freezing cold evaporator coil, allowing the moisture in the air to condense into water droplets, and then giving those droplets enough time to actually drip down the drain pan and outside.
Condensation takes time.
It takes a lot of time. If the system only runs for 10 minutes before shutting off, the coil gets cold, sure, but the moisture barely starts to bead up before the blower shuts down.
Oh, wow. So the water just sits on the indoor coil.
It sits there and evaporates right back into your ductwork. You cooled the air, but you left all the water.
So the air is 72 degrees, but it's wet air.
Exactly. Now, contrast that with Dave Hartzell's approach. A variable speed system running low and slow at 30% capacity will run for hours at a time without stopping.
Because it's not blasting freezing air.
Right. It's just gently passing the indoor air over a continuously cold coil. For 4 hours straight, it basically acts as a whole house dehumidifier. It's just wringing the water out of your indoor air like a sponge.
So because the air in his house is fundamentally drier, his body's natural cooling mechanism works perfectly.
Yes. 75 degrees of perfectly dry air allows your sweat to evaporate instantly. Your skin feels cool. A dry 75 degrees actually feels physically colder and significantly more comfortable to the human body than a damp, clammy 72 degrees.
Comfort is temperature plus humidity plus airflow.
Exactly. By leaving the thermostat alone and letting the system run continuously, you are managing the humidity, which is the true driver of comfort.
Okay, wait, I'm a little confused. If managing these narrow temperature bands and avoiding the heat strips and prioritizing long run times is the absolute key to all of this,
Yeah.
why don't I just buy a fancy smart thermostat?
Right. The obvious solution.
I mean, the whole marketing pitch of a smart thermostat is its geofencing and eco modes. It has algorithms to figure all this out for me. Why wouldn't that solve the problem?
Because it is incredibly counterintuitive. But out-of-the-box smart technology is frequently the single biggest threat to a modern high-efficiency HVAC system.
The sources detail the exact mistakes people make when they try to upgrade, and it is rough. The first one is basically a physical wiring disaster.
Oh, yeah. The DIY nightmare.
Someone brings home a $200 smart thermostat from a big box store, decides to wire it themselves, and they encounter something called the C-wire, the common wire.
Right. The C-wire provides a dedicated 24-volt power return path back to the furnace transformer.
Because older thermostats were essentially just mechanical switches with a couple of AA batteries. They didn't need constant power. But a new smart thermostat has a glowing touchscreen, continuous Wi-Fi, motion sensors.
It requires a constant, steady flow of electricity.
And if the homeowner's wall doesn't have that dedicated C-wire, they often just skip it, assuming the thermostat will, figure it out.
And the thermostat does figure it out, but it uses a highly destructive workaround called power stealing.
Power stealing.
Yeah. Because it lacks a dedicated power line to complete its electrical circuit, the smart thermostat attempts to basically sip tiny pulses of electricity down the heating or cooling relay wires. It is trying to draw just enough power to keep its screen on and its Wi-Fi connected without actually triggering the system.
But the furnace control board at the other end of those wires isn't expecting a tiny sip of power. It interprets any electrical voltage on that wire as a direct command to turn on.
Correct. So the furnace relays misinterpret those tiny power-stealing pulses as a chaotic series of start commands. Oh yeah. The homeowner's massive, expensive machinery starts rapidly clicking, flickering on and off, trying to start, and immediately stopping.
And the homeowner probably assumes their brand new $12,000 heat pump is fundamentally broken.
When in reality, the brand new piece of plastic on the wall is just sending it corrupted electrical signals.
That is terrible. But even if you hire a professional and wire it perfectly, the software setup can still ruin everything because people are impatient.
Oh, incredibly impatient.
They fly through the initial setup menus on the touchscreen. They just hit next, next, next to get to the home screen and see the weather.
And by skipping the equipment configuration, almost every smart thermostat defaults to traditional single-stage logic.
Because statistically, that is still the most common equipment in American homes.
Exactly. The software just assumes it is controlling a 1995 blast furnace.
Which brings us back to that geofencing feature. Okay, imagine a homeowner in Kingfisher, Oklahoma, commutes 40 miles to work in Oklahoma City. They leave the geofence perimeter, the thermostat senses their phone is gone, and it automatically drops into eco mode.
Right. It lets the house drift 10 degrees to save energy while it's empty.
And it creates the exact massive recovery gap we just established is disastrous for these systems.
Yeah, you're setting a trap for yourself. At 5 p.m., the homeowner starts the 40-mile drive back. The phone crosses back into the geofence. The thermostat wakes up, realizes the house is 60 degrees, and the homeowner will be there in 45 minutes.
So it triggers a massive recovery event.
It slams on the 15-kilowatt toaster coils, it activates the auxiliary heat strips in the winter, or it forces the variable speed compressor to run at 100% maximum inefficiency in the summer.
Wow. So by utilizing its supposedly smart geofencing feature, the thermostat forces a highly calibrated variable speed heat pump to operate exactly like an outdated furnace.
You didn't save any energy while you're at work. You just delayed the energy consumption and shifted it to the most expensive, inefficient time of the day.
That is brutal.
Local technicians actually report that simply adjusting 3 drop-down menus in a smart thermostat software is often a half-hour service visit that saves a customer $80 a month in winter utility bills.
So wait, you're genuinely suggesting that someone should spend hundreds of dollars on a genius smart thermostat, perfectly wire it to the wall, and then immediately lobotomize it by manually disabling all the heavily advertised eco modes and geofencing?
If you own variable speed equipment, yes, absolutely.
That's crazy.
The automated temperature adjustments actively fight the engineering of the system.
Then what is the actual value of putting one on the wall? Like, why not just use a dumb thermostat?
Well, the real value is not in letting the thermostat make operational decisions. The value lies entirely in the data and diagnostics it provides.
Okay, like what?
For instance, high-efficiency systems use very dense, thick air filters that severely restrict airflow as they capture dust. They need to be swapped reliably every 60 days to prevent the blower motor from suffocating. A smart thermostat tracks blower hours and reminds you precisely when to change it. But more importantly, you gain access to runtime reports.
Oh, right. You can open the app and see a bar chart of exactly how many hours the machine was actually running that day.
Exactly. And this is huge. If you look at your app on a 92-degree day and see that your air conditioner ran for 14 hours.
Your intuition from the 1990s is screaming that your system is broken or that your bill is going to be astronomical.
Right. But with a variable speed system, a 14-hour runtime is the goal.
Because it means it stayed in that low power zone.
Yes, it means the system stayed in its hyper-efficient 30% capacity zone, pulling minimal electricity while constantly dehumidifying the air.
Okay, but what if it only runs for a few hours?
If you look at the app on a hot day and see it only ran for 4 hours in short, loud bursts, and your house feels clammy, you immediately have the diagnostic data to know your system is either drastically oversized for the square footage, or you have a dirty coil that needs maintenance.
An old mechanical thermostat could literally never provide that insight.
Never.
Well, the good news for you listening is that fixing all of this takes about 5 minutes. Seriously, tomorrow morning, before you leave the house, walk over to your thermostat, pull the faceplate off the wall, or navigate to the About section in the menu, and find your exact model number.
Then open your phone and just search that model number, along with the phrase configuration menu or installer setup.
You need to verify 3 specific settings. Number 1, check the system type. Does the thermostat actually know it's wired to a heat pump or a variable speed system, or is it mistakenly defaulting to single-stage conventional?
Yeah, that is the foundation of everything we've discussed today.
Number 2, check the setback band. Ensure you aren't allowing massive 10-degree swings. Keep it tight, like 2 to 4 degrees max. And number 3, locate the emergency heat lockout temperature.
This is critical for winter.
Right. This is the setting that tells the thermostat at what outdoor temperature it is legally allowed to turn on those 15-kilowatt toaster coils. Make sure it isn't set to trigger just because it's a slightly chilly 45 degrees outside.
And look, if you dig into these menus and feel totally lost, do not just guess. Call the HVAC company that installed your equipment. They can usually walk you through the correct software parameters right over the phone.
It's basically a free 20-minute conversation.
It is the highest return on investment you will ever get for a 5-minute phone call.
Yeah.
You know, this entire discussion highlights a really fascinating dynamic.
What's that?
Well, Dave Hartzell mentioned in the sources that the number on the thermostat screen matters far less than what kind of machinery is actually sitting behind the wall.
Oh, for sure.
And we have spent this entire time realizing that utilizing our absolute most efficient, cutting-edge home technology actually requires us to actively unlearn decades of basic common sense habits.
We were literally raised to believe that turning it off was the responsible thing to do, and now turning it off is the problem.
It makes you wonder, if the conventional wisdom surrounding our homes became completely obsolete without us even noticing, what other daily rules of thumb in our lives are secretly costing us time or money or efficiency simply because the underlying technology has quietly evolved way faster than our human habits have?
That is a great point. We were basically navigating a modern world using a 1990s compass. So tomorrow morning when you're rushing out the door and you reach out to give that thermostat dial a satisfying click to drop the temperature while you're at work, maybe stop, take a breath, and just let the Ferrari cruise.